Welcome back to another episode of the Water Matters podcast. I am pleased to be joined by Tim Smedley. We have an important episode today, an episode that I couldn't do without Tim. And Tim has an insight on this subject, which I think is going to be very interesting to me and to anyone listening to this episode. It is all about Channel 4's recent show, Dirty Business. So I think the UK's sewage scandal has moved from something that most people didn't know about into one of the biggest environmental and public health issues in the country. And Channel 4's Dirty Business has just brought that story to life. And we're recording this a little bit further than we wanted to after the release of that show. And so we wanted to get on the mics and sort of record this episode a little while ago, but actually sometimes delays and complications with calendars work in your favour, and this time it's done exactly that, because what's been able to happen in between times is Tim has had a conversation with one of the main characters of the show, who Tim knows from his research and when he wrote The Last Drop, his book that Tim Smedley, that we've talked about many times on previous episodes, is well known for. So we've really had, there's a benefit here to us waiting a little while and taking a little while to get to have this conversation. But I'm excited to sort of ask Tim a number of questions about this topic, and I think it's one that has certainly captured the public interest. Perhaps, not to go too deep in one direction too early on, but perhaps not as much as we would want it to. But it's certainly sort of had a lot of discussion about it. And so let's bring the story to life. Let's get Tim Smedley's perspective on it. And so first of all, especially Tim, for any listeners that haven't watched the show yet, what's it all about? And perhaps you could just give a bit of an overview of Channel 4's show, Dirty Business.
Yeah, definitely. So Dirty Business, a 3-part docu-drama, came out in February 2026. And it tells the story of the sewage scandal, but it tells the story through the retelling of the formation of an NGO that's quite local to here, actually, called WASP, Windrush Against Sewage Pollution. And that was started by two chaps, Ash Smith and Peter Hammond. They were neighbours in a Cotswold village that the River Windrush runs through. And for anyone that knows the Cotswolds, the River Windrush is the one that carries on through Bourton-on-the-Water. So it's quite a famous Cotswolds river. But they discovered back in the early 2010s that there was some sewage going into that river, and they kind of looked into it. Both, no, they weren't both retired, actually. Ash is a retired policeman, and he was retired at the time. Peter Hammond is and was a working Oxford professor, works on things like AI, but before most of us had heard of AI, he was working on AI. But they saw that there was sewage coming into the river. They were trying to work out why, and they found that there was releases coming from the local sewage works. I think Whitney was the first one they researched. And this seemed scandalous, so they contacted the Environment Agency and found out that, lo and behold, there had been some sewage release, but the Environment Agency weren't going to do anything about it. And that kind of got Ash and Peter's attention, kind of got them riled a bit. They started looking into this more. And the more they looked into it, the more they found that sewage works, not just locally, but around the country, were releasing untreated sewage into our rivers and our seas, or all of our waterways, basically. So the sewage scandal broke around 2020. There's a lot of detail here, so you're going to have to jump in at some point and tell me when to stop. The sewage scandal broke in 2020, in part thanks to Ash and Peter's work, but also thanks to the fact that the pipes that come out of sewage works, known as, let me just get my notes up, CSOs, combined sewer overflows, didn't used to be monitors. So you basically could get away with sending whatever you wanted down it. No one knew what was coming out. The only way would be massive fish kills, making it apparent that a big pollution event had happened. The Environment Agency would come and investigate, and ideally the water company would get a fine and this would be shut down. Those sewage overflows from 2015 onwards had to start to be fitted with monitors, known as event duration monitors, which would show what's coming out of those pipes how often and when.
And that was when 2015.
2015 was when that started coming in.
So that was, and that was, that was brought in by the Environment Agency.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
At a time when they were doing perhaps a better job than was depicted in the show.
Well, we have kind of got the Environment Agency to thank for some part of this, yes. So they did have to fit their sewage work pipes with these monitors.
Yeah.
Why it wasn't done before 2015 is anyone's guess. The sewage scandal hasn't only started happening in 2020, it's just we started finding out about it in 2020.
Yes.
The reason why 2020, not 2015, is they were given until 2023 to fit these monitors.
Yes.
So we start to get to, 10%, 20%, 30% coverage. By 20%, we had 70% coverage and enough data to show what was really happening. And the true picture that came out in 2020, and bear in mind, obviously 2020 is the pandemic year. 2020 also happened to be the year that I began writing my book, The Last Drop, and it was kind of fascinating to see these stories kind of play out in real time as I was trying to work on a book about water.
Yes.
As a slight side note, my first book was about air pollution. I really didn't want to write about pollution again. I was really hoping to avoid pollution as a topic. But then the sewage scandal came through and I realised I absolutely had to write about it, and that water quality and water quantity are two sides of the same coin. They are both equally important. A polluted river is just as useless as a dried up one in terms of our water supply. But anyway, 2020 we had 70% coverage of these pipes coming out of sewage works, and that showed, just to remind myself of the figures, that water companies in England and Wales in the previous year had discharged raw sewage into rivers more than 200,000 times for a combined total of 1.5 million hours. This is kind of where dirty business comes in. The scandal's starting to come through. Another big contribution of Peter and Ash was to look into some of those spills. So spills is this slightly euphemistic term for the releasing of untreated sewage. It was legally allowed in exceptional circumstances. Exceptional circumstances meaning a storm, where so much water is coming through the combined sewage overflows. You've got rainwater coming through as well as sewage water. The sewage works get overwhelmed and they have to release, send some through a release valve. But it will be very diluted with rainwater. That was the thinking.
Yes.
It turned out that this was happening all the time. No storms, light rain, sometimes no rain. I think Peter Hammond was the first person to discover a long spill coming out of sewage works on a day there was no rain at all. And they started to chart this nationwide and essentially found that these releases of untreated sewage were happening so often that there was no possible excuse for it other than it was cheaper for the sewage companies to do it. So if you can get away with pumping out untreated sewage into a river and using the river essentially as part of our sewage system, which it remains, if you can get away with doing that, if the regulators aren't telling you off, aren't fining you, you will.
Yeah, and I guess that what you just said there might be your answer to this question that I'd made a note of. Like, when monitoring finally came in, the scale doubled almost overnight, as they share in the show. So was the biggest issue the pollution itself, or the fact that it had been hidden?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think so. That this is where I think some people will be surprised watching Dirty Business, in that the baddies, as it were, aren't just the private water companies. They're also some of the people at the top of the Environment Agency. This, and Ash will say this, so just again a slight side note, I met with Ash whilst writing the book, and I worked with him a bit on learning about this issue, some of it before the telling of Dirty Business, so I was working with him in 2021. For people watching on YouTube, they'll be able to see that I'm wearing a cap which says Windrush against sewage pollution. Ash gave me this cap when we gave a joint talk in the Cotswolds a couple of years ago. So I know Ash a little bit. I know some of this story a little bit.
I was just on that. I was actually, having watched the show, I'll just grab this for anyone that is actually watching the video episode. Having watched the show, I then grab your book and sort of went straight to the back and saw how many references there were to Ash Smith, and that's what all these little stickers are.
Okay.
Because I was like...
So for people listening, there's probably, about 4 or 5 tabs sticking out of my book?
Exactly, yeah. And it tells the exact... obviously, it tells the exact same story of what I'd just watched in the show, sort of the exact same specifics. It was... I was... And I've read this book. When did we meet? Probably 3 years ago now, I guess. Maybe slightly longer. And so it's been a long time since I have read this book. And my memory is such I couldn't remember it all anyway. But
I don't remember it all, don't I?
no, quite. So, but I really was taken aback by just how you've already written this story that Channel 4 have just produced the show on, and it was the exact same. Obviously there's bits in here, or rather bits in Dirty Business that don't feature in here, and we'll come on to the more sort of harrowing examples of those in a bit. But just first of all, I was quite I was sort of patting you on the back for this story is not new. You've written it, and of course, everything that Ash told you, I'm sure, it was also, of course, the basis for the show.
Yeah, I'm assuming the program makers will have read the book actually, because some of the telling is similar. Yeah. I felt like I knew this story when I was watching Dirty Business,
Absolutely.
And for the first 2 episodes I did, but then there's some revelations that come out that I did not know that have kind of happened since, and we'll get onto those. But my point was that I think one of the shocks is, and that I got from Ash when I first met him, is how this was allowed by the Environment Agency and DEFRA. So this wasn't just water companies acting illegally and getting away with not treating sewage, because, as I say, this was discovered publicly from 2020 onwards. 2021, the numbers doubled from 200,000 discharges to 400,000 times. The numbers haven't really come down that much still. We're talking 2026. So the scandal is ongoing, even though it's been discovered. But some of the telling in Dirty Business was fascinating. And they did some brilliant dramatised scenes in the Environment Agency. Some of the wording I recognised from Environment Agency emails that had been released to the press a few years ago. So the wording is accurate and correct. Whether it was presented in a group meeting, that's probably more dramatised way of showing it.
Yes.
But we see the Environment Agency steadily ratcheting down its investigations, not up at this exact time. So they first started to bring in company self-monitoring. So rather than an Environment Agency agents going out to investigate sewage spills, the water companies would tell them. They would report on their own sewage spills and tell the Environment Agency if there's been an illegal spillage. Obviously, they didn't. Then Environment Agency staff were not allowed to use company cars anymore. So even if they wanted to go out and research something, they couldn't use the company cars. So we see a steady degradation, I suppose, of the regulator, of the regulation of this system. Now, a privatised system could only work from 1991 onwards with really strong regulation for this exact reason. So private businesses will do what they can to make a profit. That's their raison d'etre. In order for the water to come out clean, that requires regulation. And it seems regulation has been a lot lighter touch than anyone could have ever imagined, really, to the point of, some of Ash's allegations against them are strong, but yet they've not taken him to court. He sees it as illegal. He sees water company bosses as akin to mafia bosses. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know, but it is amazing to see the evidence of the sewage scandal ongoing, and the fact that it was allowed by the regulator that was supposed to stop it.
Yes, I think... So for listeners, Tim has also written a article for us, a 2-part article that's been shared. If you're as you're listening to this, that is now live on watermatters.life on our website, and very worth a read. Because in that article, you're right that if you give private companies an easy way to make money, then they'll take it. And so this is fundamentally an economic sort of design problem, or certainly in part, yes?
Yeah, definitely. And again, this is where it gets very complicated, because water companies aren't just locally owned. Most of England's water companies are owned by a really complicated web of international conglomerates, pension funds, venture capital. Thames Water is owned by various, again, pension funds, but venture capital from all around the world. Why are they so interested in water companies? Well, because water companies have monopolies. So wherever you live in England, you have to use that local water company. You have to pay whatever bill they set. It's kind of a license to print money. It's a very safe thing to invest in. And the amount of money that's come out of water companies to shareholders has been really quite incredible. Again, a stat from the programme: since privatisation, water companies have extracted £85 billion in dividends and accumulated more than £60 billion in debt. So again, these were all companies that were debt-free when they became privatised. So they were all handed to private companies without any debt in 1991. £60 billion has now been racked up in debt. According to Ash, for every pound you spend on your water bill, 33 pence on average is the amount spent on paying off that debt. So, and we'll get on to privatisation versus bringing back into public ownership. But his point is, if we went back into public ownership, immediately we'd get that 33 pence and the pound back.
Yes.
There wouldn't be any debt to pay off anymore.
Yes. The show quite powerfully sort of shows, doesn't it, right at the beginning, and then it re-shows it a few times, the clip of Margaret Thatcher in I forget the year now, but when she sort of announces that the privatisation of the water companies and about I can't remember the exact words she used, but about, let's just see, it could work out very sort of positively, and it could be, one of the best things that's happened, sort of thing.
Yeah. Without wanting to get too Ben Elton about it, it does all go back to Margaret Thatcher. But it was very ideological at that time. There was a strong belief, and it wasn't just this country, many countries, that privatisation was far more efficient and a far better way of bringing investment in to any area than state ownership. There's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that in other sectors, but arguably not a sector that only has monopolies. There is no competition in water. You have to pay the water company that you live in.
Yes.
So there's no benefit of competition, which is one of the main benefits of capitalism and privatisation. The other thing is, as I say, it might have worked with really strong regulation, possibly. As long as the regulator was there watching at every step.
Yes.
As soon as there's
completely independent.
Completely independent. As soon as there's a pollution spillage, straight in there. That's not allowed. Ensuring that sewage systems are upgraded, kept up to speed. There's plenty of sewage works in this country that are just far too small for the population they serve.
Yes.
Because again, the upgrades, why do you pay for it if you can get away with not?
Yeah.
If you're getting away with just spilling the sewage into your local river, why spend the £1 million, £2 million on upgrading your sewage works?
Indeed, and you've just answered my next question, which was, if it is this economic sort of design problem, and then a natural next question seems to be, is dumping sewage simply the rational outcome of the system that has been built? Which effectively...
I think it is. Yeah, again, without strong regulation, yes, it is a rational outcome. It is a rational... business decision to say, no one's making us do this, and we're not required to upgrade these works. And in fact, we've been pumping sewage out of these pipes for years, and no one's minded. No one's minded to the point that they started to say you can monitor yourself on it. Yes. So there is a tacit approval that begins at some point in the Environment Agency and arguably in DEFRA. Yeah. That this system was how they wanted it to, and that's the really hard thing to explain.
Yes, and so on that then, do you have, I'm sure you have an opinion on it, this sequence of self-monitoring, fewer inspections, then effectively shutting down inspections altogether, was that a gradual decline or a deliberate shift?
Well, this is where I thought I knew the story until I saw Dirty Business.
Okay.
So I thought I had some sympathy with the Environment Agency. So when David Cameron came in, we had the coalition government and the austerity measures. The Environment Agency got cut in half in quite a short speed of time. They didn't have the staff, they didn't have the budget. Sir James Bevan, who is the chief of the Environment Agency, through pretty much all of this story, said you get the regulation you pay for. So there's this kind of suggestion that, of course, they want to monitor all these things. Of course, they want to investigate, but they can't because of austerity, and they've been cut in half. So I was kind of watching along, kind of nodding along, going, yeah, but still having a bit of sympathy. But then there's a moment in, I think it's episode 2. We should say there might be some spoilers in this. If you've not seen the show,
True.
you might want to pause and watch. There's this whistleblower character called Hannah who is fictionalised, but she's based on a real whistleblower called Robert Forrester, who worked at the EA for 7 years. Only left earlier this year, apparently.
I was surprised by that actually when I read that he was only a settlement agreement in January 2026.
Yeah. But it means he was there, being able to see all this stuff play
absolutely.
out. Anyway, the Hannah/Robert character said, we used to be able to investigate, prosecute, whatever it took. But then they told us the companies could regulate themselves, and we're familiar with that, with what we've discussed so far. But then she says that's not all. In 2021, Sir James hiked the prices the water companies paid for their permits. It was called charge-funded regulation. We get £96 million from government. We are now pulling in £411 million from these charges. We're swimming in cash. So that was a revelation to me. £411 million is a lot for anyone, let alone a government agency that is charged, that is, his mandate is investigating environmental, environmental degradation or events.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money. So the EA did have the money from 2021.
Yeah.
This is right in the heart of when the sewage scandal is coming out, when we got these 400,000 events a year figure.
Yeah. And we don't need to make this personal at all, but I'm interested. Did your opinion on Sir James Bevan change from when you wrote a book to when you watched the show?
Yeah, well, as I say, I did have some sympathy with him and the EA. Yeah, because I felt that they had one hand tied behind their back by austerity.
Yes.
That was my thinking until Dirty Business. So, following that, and to update you a little bit, I rang Ash this week because I wanted to speak to him again before coming on this podcast, and I wanted to kind of get his take on some of these figures. And I said, well, I hadn't come across that £411 million figure before. I always thought they had enough cash. They didn't have enough cash to investigate. Yeah. And I mentioned this, you get the regulation you pay for quote from James Bevan, which is quoted in my book.
In your book, yeah.
And he said, well, you get the regulation you pay for was clever wording. He said, yes, you get the regulation you pay for. And who's paying? The water industry. They're getting the regulation they pay for. So, again, it's a strong statement, but he's essentially suggesting, alleging, trying to think of kind of the words that Ian Hislop would use in to ensure we don't get lawyers on the phone. But he's kind of suggesting that the EA was paid off, that the water companies were paying for light touch regulation and paying a lot of money. Yes. So these are huge figures. £411 million. That's a lot of money. The individual companies must have been paying tens of millions of pounds. That's more than most have ever been fined, by the way, for illegally dumping pollution. Yeah.
And at that point, the obvious conclusion to draw is that under-regulation becomes complicity.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, WASP, Ash's organisation, have also found a revolving door of employment between water companies and the Environment Agency. Over 200 Environment Agency staff have been found to hold shares in water companies. There have been non-exec directors that have kind of switched vice versa. Even James Bevan himself, when he left the EA, joined the board of Welsh Water. So revolving doors are a pretty good way of putting it. They're very used to working with each other to the point that it's hard to see where the lines are anymore.
Yes, yeah, very much so, very much so. And I think on that whole subject, there's just so many unanswered questions that remain, that probably are now in the public domain more so than ever before, I guess, in relation to, because of that, what, if anything, is likely to change, or in part because of that,
Yeah, well, we're in a really strange situation now because it's all very public. And if you haven't seen this program, anyone that's listening or watching, please do. It's also a very good drama. It's also very compelling. It's even funny in places. Yeah. Incredibly well acted,
with some big actors in as well. Like, I was genuinely shocked.
Top name action.
How did they? Did Ash sort of say anything about, like, how did they even manage to get that level of actor to take part?
Yeah, very big names. David Thewlis plays Ash. Jason Watkins plays Peter. Everyone will recognise both of these actors. They've been in a lot of shows over the years. Yeah. I saw David Thewlis recently on a big Netflix show. I think you mentioned you've seen him in one recently.
Absolutely. Just caught. I can't remember what platform or channel it's on, but The Artful Dodger, I'm sure it's called. He's plays Fagin in that, and he's brilliant. And I was like, we've not, just recently watched that. Genuinely surprised that they managed to get him playing Ash.
Yeah,
in the show.
Yeah, so I asked us, is it really weird seeing yourself portrayed on the screen? He said, yes, it is. But he said some past colleagues have said they recognise some of his mannerisms and the way he is, because he is quite a dry, to the point person, Ash.
Right.
And you get that impression with David Thewlis's playing of it. Yeah. So I said, well, did he kind of track you for a few days or a week or something? He said no, because he some actors prefer not to, because they don't want to kind of give it an impersonation.
Yeah.
So he saw a lot of kind of footage of Ash, but didn't want to meet him before filming.
Okay.
But they were on set for a bit of it, so they did meet plenty.
Yeah.
The guy that plays Peter Hammond did spend a day with Peter to kind of pick up on some of his mannerisms. Really great cast.
Yeah, and for that reason alone, well worth a watch. And one of the things that certainly delayed my me sitting down and watching it was just how much it had angered some people that had spoke to me about it, and sort of it came with a pre-warning of you'll get a bit obsessed about this and a bit angry, and I think difficult not to, perfectly sort of normal reaction, especially with some of the potential implications this has had on some people's families and all that sort of stuff. So but yes, a really good sort of he must be happy with the show, is he?
Yes, he is. Yeah. So he said they first got approached about 2 years ago, and it slowly started working with the program makers. And I mean, there's a lot of complex issues to get into, so they had to work a lot with the researchers and writers. And really, really happy. And then there's this story in the show in Dirty Business that, again, I hadn't come across before, which is a really moving, emotional story, because I guess one thing about water and the sewage scandal is it can be quite hard to bring it to life sometimes. Mm-hmm. I think anyone that's worked in that area can struggle to get people to get immediately emotionally involved. I think I manage it in the book, but it is hard to do. There's a very emotional story in it, and I guess, again, kind of spoiler alert here if you haven't seen it, but there's a story of a girl called Heather Preen who went on holiday to Devon in 1999 with her family. As you do when you're in Devon, they're on the beach, they go for a walk, they play in the sea for a bit, but they didn't realise that there was a sewage outflow pipe going into the sea. It's the Southwest Water region. Now, watching that unfold, they spliced flashbacks of that story of the Preen family's holiday, Heather starting to get more and more ill. They spliced that in between these kind of more up-to-date investigations by Peter and Ash, uncovering the sewage scandal. But back in 1999, no one knew about it at all. Yeah. To cut a long story short, Heather dies, and that I found just incredibly hard watch,
Yeah.
powerful watch, but also important watch, because just a reminder of how important this stuff is. Cleanliness of our waterways, cleanliness of our places we go on holiday, ultimately cleanliness of the water that comes out of our taps, but it is life and death.
Yeah.
And I think even I can forget that sometimes when I'm talking about it.
Yeah, of course.
And again, the acting is incredibly powerful by the actors that play the parents. And I wanted to kind of follow up on this. I just did a bit of Googling to see. And so Julie Morm, she remarried, Heather's mum, appeared on BBC Breakfast after Dirty Business. And she said, I'll quote her. So she told BBC Breakfast, "The way Heather died, it was a horrible death. In effect, she was poisoned. I asked the programme makers to make sure they got that across to people." And then she said, "I really felt heard and listened to. The scenes are so sensitive and powerful." And I thought that was really good to learn that from Heather's mum's point of view, that the programme makers had got it right.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it could be possible to be exploitative with the telling of those stories, but it absolutely isn't.
Yeah.
It absolutely does justice to that family and to the issue, I guess.
Yes.
Because Heather's not the only child to have died from pollution incidents. So it is that important.
Yes.
And it is that important to get right. Yes. And it makes it that much more scandalous that this is still ongoing.
Yeah.
That there is still untreated sewage being released into our rivers right now, right as we speak.
And do you think it's interesting that even you who wrote a book about it, studied for research and studied for several years in preparation for that, and then have done lots of talks about the subject of obviously water in a much broader sense, but you definitely sort of do cover the these sewage spills issues and all that sort of stuff. Do you think that we've underestimated the public health risk of sewage pollution?
Yes, 100%, because most people still don't know about it. So it has been, it's been a story I've been following since 2020. It does make headlines each year. It's making more headlines now thanks to Dirty Business. The power of drama and docu-drama shouldn't be underestimated. I think it connects with people far more than headlines do.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm so pleased to have seen Dirty Business and pleased to see the waves it's making. But it's still underestimated, and there's still plenty of people don't know about it.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of kind of bathing sites on rivers now that people go to every year, and they're almost like mini inland beaches. All rivers in England have some level of sewage release into them, because we see the numbers every year. These monitor numbers are released every summer, and it's always very high. There's a map called "Is My River Fit to Play In?", which I recommend everyone Google and check out, and you can zoom into your local sewage works, you can zoom into where the pipes are, and it will show you how many times a sewage release has happened. You won't find a zero.
Yeah.
You won't find a zero. So our rivers aren't fit to play in, is the simple answer to their question. Yet most people aren't aware of that, and wild swimming has become a
really popular,
popular thing. And it's a hard thing to say don't do it, because we should be able to do it. We should be able to play in our rivers and streams. Our children should be able to, and then absolutely our seas. Some blue flag beaches have sewage outflow pipes on them. It is a real scandal. And awareness is a big part of changing that. So absolutely, we've underestimated it.
Yeah, and does the debate need to shift from the environment, because that's what it's always about?
Yes.
We have a direct experience of that in our sort of day-to-day world of this whole sort of nutrient neutrality and planning permission being prevented through septic tanks discharging into watercourses and the algal blooms and all that sort of stuff. It's all about the environment. But does it need to shift from the environment to a health crisis?
Yeah, in a way, the environment is the next step. That's kind of what we should be talking about. But the health crisis is more acute, more immediate, and more important to most people's lives. And that's the first step. That's what we should be sorting out. Then it's the environment, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And then after that, really, what I would love to be sitting around talking about in doing this podcast in like 2 years' time, 5 years' time, is just the treatment quality of drinking water, and have we got that right? That's kind of where we should be at. But we haven't sorted out the very basics of untreated sewage. And the fact that, that's still ongoing is crazy.
Yeah, because at the moment, would you say, especially with your, from the book and now the extra sort of information that you learned from the show, are rivers effectively being used as part of the treatment process?
Yeah, they are 100%. Yeah, and I think I asked that to Ash even for the book back in 2021-22. Yes, very much. So rivers have been used as a tertiary treatment process. They've been used as a nature-based solution for sewage treatment, for sure. To the the effect of mass fish kill-offs and horrible sickness for people swimming, people playing, to the point of deaths such as Hannah Preen. Yeah. And so, be interested in your opinion, but also maybe Ash, covered it as well in your conversation with him. Has anything, actually changed? The government introduced the Water Special Measures Act, but your article suggests that nothing has materially changed. That's your view on that, presumably? Yeah, so most campaigners, in fact, really any water campaigner I've come across, believes that privatisation has failed, that we have to use, it's interesting that special measures in the Act name, but we have to use special administration to bring some of those water companies back into state ownership to sort this out. Now, yes, the Labour government will say that the Water Special Measures Act 2025 was enough to address the sewage scandal. That it strengthens regulation, introduces jail time for executives, bans bonuses, enables faster fines for pollution, but very little of that has happened. No water company boss will ever be sent to prison. They say that that's part of the Special Measures Act. It won't happen. These are kind of headline-grabbing things, but nothing has effectively changed.
No, and wasn't there also? I think the show ends with a load of blocks of text, kind of confirming or outlining a few things, and I'm sure that one of those even said that yes, bonuses have sort of been stopped, but they're now being classed as retention payments or something.
Yeah, exactly the same as bankers' bonuses when they tried that after the financial crisis. There's just clever accounting ways of getting around that. You can add salary onto bonuses and vice versa.
Yeah.
Nothing has effectively changed there. Again, I asked Ash this week. I said, so has the Special Measures Act kind of changed anything? And he said, no, we're over a year in. Nothing has changed. They're still relying on illegal pollution and not doing the job they're required to do. As for the cost, so again, I had some sympathy for the DEFRA here and the government. So there's £60 billion of debt held in water companies. The argument you might hear is that if they were to be brought into state ownership, that's the taxpayers have to pay off 60 billion of debt. However, there is something called special administration, which is specifically for this situation, for water companies, any utility company actually that goes into bankruptcy or needs to be taken back into state ownership can use special administration, which writes off the debt. So we don't actually have to pay off that debt. In reality, some of the owners are pension funds and so on. Mm-hmm. Probably the government would give some money to those, but it wouldn't be anything like 60 billion. Mm-hmm. Again, this Ash's point, as for the cost, he said, quote, "We would immediately be 33 pence in the pound better off thereabouts. Everyone can get a bill cut. The 33 pence being the amount paid for servicing water company debt. And that's getting worse," said Ash, "because they're now borrowing money at 9.75% 5% plus expenses. So again, this is kind of post Iran war, everything getting more expensive. This is a ludicrous amount of money just being milked out of bill payers. So just by not doing that, the country would be better off. So the cost argument doesn't quite work either. Now, to update you where Ash and Peter are at. So to capitalise on dirty business, and they said they've had a really good public response. They've also got lots more donations coming into the WASP website. So they're using this on a referendum campaign. Mm-hmm. Now, referendum is almost a dirty word in this country ever since 2016. So I raised my eyebrows at that. Why a referendum? So they want a referendum. And also, I should say, WASP is bigger than just Ash and Peter by this point. Mm-hmm. They have quite a large network of people working for WASP and volunteers and so on. And Ash is always keen to make that point. So I should get that in. But WASP are now, they've set up one of those government petitions you can sign that's calling for a referendum on the ownership of water companies, whether they should be privatised or state-run. It's around 75,000 signatures when I last checked. It needs to reach 100,000 to get a debate in Parliament. I'm sure they'll get there because it's open until October. But if you are a British citizen listening to this, do sign that petition. Now, so I said, why a referendum? And he said, which I quite liked because it's quite an Ash thing to do, because no one wants a referendum. So they don't want a referendum either. They want to use the threat of it. Yes. And the suggestion of the realistic prospect now of a debate in Parliament about it, to say, well, a referendum would actually put this to the people. Why would the government not want to do that? The reason why is because people want public ownership. Mm-hmm. Very clearly. That referendum would be an absolute landslide. How do I know that? Well, interestingly, this happened in Scotland at the time in the early 90s, mm-hmm. when privatisation was happening in England. Scotland was also expected to follow suit. They held a local referendum run out of Strathclyde County Council, but all Scots were allowed to respond to it. They were asked, do you agree with the government proposal to privatise water? 1.2 million Scots voted. That's probably close to the adult population of Scotland. 97.2% voted against privatisation. So 1.194 million. So it's not even close when you put the public vote to it. And there's an organisation called We Own It, which I guess lobbies for public ownership. They've run polls that find 82% currently want water back in public hands, but this is all before dirty business and before some of these more major talking points have come out. So I don't think it would even be 82%. So why a referendum to Ash? Because it forces the government to debate it. And once debated, he feels and they feel, and I'm coming around to this idea now, actually, having talked to him, that it will be a very one-sided debate. It's pretty hard when you shine the sunlight of truth on this issue to say this current system's working. No one can say that. No. And they've had the attempt now. The government have had the attempt to say we've put a new act in to fix it. It hasn't worked. So someone in government at some point soon, I would suggest, we'll have to say at least one water company, probably Thames Water would be my guess, will need to be taken back into public ownership. And then we'll start to see some changes.
Yeah, and that was sort of exactly the direction I was going to take this next. You know, if we accept that this system is broken, which it feels impossible to do anything other than, reach any other conclusion, especially having watched Dirty Business. If we accept that the system is broken, then what does a realistic fix look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, the only fix really is special administration to bring a or several water companies back into state ownership, write off those debts, and start investing purely in those water companies. So again, it's worth saying that they're all paid by our bills. So the money is there and always has been and always will be. But if all of that bill, rather than, 77 pence, if out of every pound, if all of the pound out of every pound goes into water treatment, sewage treatment, sewage work upgrades, which, you know, many water companies have got away with not upgrading their sewage work sufficiently. Many have publicly admitted to that as well. This isn't a spurious claim. If all of that money went into actually investing into the water system, and obviously with proper regulation, I mean, it's eminently solvable. The government just don't want to do it. Too complicated, worried about costs, hoping this will go away. But it's not going away. It's quite the opposite.
And was Ash sort of pleasantly surprised about the public reaction to the show? I think I think you've drawn a sort of comparison, maybe in the article or maybe just in sort of discussions that we've had in the past with the whole post office scandal and that sort of thing. You know, in that it doesn't feel like this has perhaps reached anywhere near the height that achieved.
So that one was Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, and that came out in 2024, and did have a big impact. I did ask Ash directly about that. So he said, do you feel you've had the same kind of response that Mr. Bates versus the Post Office did? He said, from the public, yes. He said the amount of people writing in, calling him. I mean, it took me a month to be able to get him on the phone, and I know him.
Yeah,
he's been completely swamped, but in a good way,
yeah.
Because he's spent the last God knows how many years of his life working on this issue and trying to raise awareness about it. But from the government, clearly no. Not the same response. So the government did openly respond to Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, talked in the press about it, changed the way that the compensation payments are being made. But the Post Office is a separate entity. It's no longer state-owned. I think it was privatised during the coalition government. So it's relatively easy for the government to throw their hands up and say, "Oh, naughty company, we're being tough on them." With the revelations from Dirty Business, they can't do that because the revelations are equally against the Environment Agency and DEFRA, which is the government.
Yeah.
So if they throw their hands up and say, "Oh, how terrible," they're admitting to quite a large amount of fault here.
Yes.
Admittedly, a lot of this happens via previous administrations, under the coalition government, under the Conservative government, but it's ongoing now. And the Labour government's attempt to fix it also hasn't worked. So it is an interesting one. So Ash's take on it is that government hoping it goes away, pretending this hasn't happened. But obviously that's a terrible response and isn't going to work, because this isn't going away and people are way more aware of it now than ever before. So government will have to respond. How they respond is open to speculation. I just feel that this system, the current privatised system, is doomed. It will come to an end at some point. I mean, government are bringing railway back into to public ownership, so they're not fully against public ownership. This is a Labour government after all. I think it would be a hugely popular thing to do, and I think that will probably sway the day, really. So my guess, although I guess this last year that we'd see a big water company brought into public ownership, it didn't happen. No. But I'm going to say it again for this year.
Well, I was going to say, just in case any one of them is listening, let's just add this bit in. Let's say if you were in charge tomorrow, what are the first 3 things you'd do?
Yes, well, special administration of a big water company. I don't want to say which, but I feel like I probably already have. Writing off that debt, investing in our water system correctly, which needs to start first and foremost with upgrading sewage works. Sewage works can be upgraded. Plenty of countries do this fine. They manage to treat their sewage and not dump it untreated into their waterways. Plenty of European countries, especially watching Dirty Business, would be astonished. They'd be shocked that the UK is so behind the times with how we deal with our water system, how we deal with our waste especially. And again, going back to kind of Thatcher privatisation, we were supposed to in 30 years' time be you know, the envy of the world with our privatised water system and nice shiny sewage works and how wonderful everything works with private investment. It's the opposite. So it's failed. That game is over, or at least it should be over. Amazingly, it's still clinging on. But that is what I would change. One thing I wouldn't change, and is also worth making a point of, is most of the staff in water companies are great. They work very hard. They do hard jobs. They do their very best. And I'd go the same for Environment Agency inspectors too. Most of them have had their hands tied behind their back trying to do really difficult work. So it wouldn't be a sudden clear out. You could keep most of the same people. It would just be enabling them to do their jobs.
Yeah, and I think the show did a really good job of actually suggesting that as well.
It did.
I think, and the fact that
with the Mickey Lazarus character,
who
I'm assuming from the name is a fictionalised character.
Yeah, his character was really sort of powerful, wasn't it? He was really doing all he could to help.
And that's been my experience of the people I've met and interviewed.
Yeah, and Definitely. Then clearly the sort of the lady who was playing the character that was actually that Robert chap, I think you said his name was. You know, the fact that he was doing what he was doing for 7 years while sort of in his post, you know, I mean, he wouldn't have put himself at that risk or sort of doing that if he didn't care about the situation. And I think the show did a really good job of suggesting exactly what you've just said, which is people in these organisations. A lot of the people in these organisations really do care, and that's why they're there.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And you don't work on the front line of the Environment Agency if you don't care about the environment, and you don't work on the front line of a water sector if you don't care about keeping the water system running and running well. So the people do care. They've just had money taken away from them to pay off shareholders and debt, and in the Environment Agency, it's even harder to explain, really, why they weren't allowed to do their jobs. Again, I said I felt that austerity was the reason, but turns out it wasn't. They had the money in 2021.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of most challenging part about the whole thing, is sort of wrapping your head around that and ending up anywhere other than just really quite angry.
Yeah. And we should be angry, really. I mean, that's certainly one big takeaway from watching it unfold in Dirty Business, and you know, watching it unfold in real life. When I was writing the book, it does make you angry. It's hard to have much of a different emotional response to it, because it's shocking that our waterways are in such a bad state, and a lot of that is pollution for profit. So we absolutely should be angry about it, and we should be very angry with the government's lack of response at the moment. And the only response really being that they came up with an act over a year ago that solved it, but it hasn't solved it. We know it hasn't. It's ongoing.
No. And I suppose with that in mind, you know, interested in your answer to this, do you believe this moment, you know, Dirty Business, public awareness, petitions, you know, can actually force change, or will it fade like previous scandals?
I mean, it has to force change. It has to, because otherwise we'll see more deaths like Heather Preen. We'll see more illnesses. It has to. It can't fade, because I don't think I'm just being hopeful in saying that. I think what I mean is that it's an ongoing public health problem that it won't go away. There'll continue to be illnesses and deaths and environmental degradation and, you know, fish kills. So people won't accept that. Now that it's a known issue, politically it won't be possible to continue with that as your policy. So, you know, there's some benefit to a general election likely being kind of 3 years away. I think there's enough time for these pennies to drop for all the major parties to realise that this absolutely has to be in manifestos, that water is a key priority. But before then, you know, the government will have to act to say we've done this. I don't think it can just be a manifesto promise anymore. They will have to do something big. And as the months drag on from this act that came out in February 2025, and the pollution situation remaining as bad, if not potentially worse, and there's a lot more dry spills now because there's a lot more dry spells. I think they will have to act. So I'm fairly optimistic, if that's the right word, that I think we'll see action on this. I don't think it can fade away. It's too big a scandal too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Anything we've not covered about dirty business that we think that maybe we've missed and would be useful for listeners to sort of delve into a little bit more?
Yeah, I think we've covered it well. I mean, I would say it's a really good watch. Like, it's a really compelling drama. I think even if you're watching this or listening to this from another country and you don't have much skin in the game for the British water industry, it's still well worth watching. It's still a very good drama, and I imagine, so it's on Channel 4 at the moment. I would expect it will get picked up by a big streamer at some point and shown internationally, because it's a powerful drama. It's very well played and well acted, well portrayed, but it's incredible that it's true.
Yeah, incredibly sad in places, and but if it can lead to change and improvements, then incredibly worthwhile. And nothing can be changed about what's happened. We can only sort of influence and change what happens as a result of it. So
yeah, and I would say if you're watching in Britain, do sign up to this parliamentary petition. We'll put the link on the blog. Blog will come out at the same time as this podcast. We've got till October to sign it. Whether there will be a referendum, I think, is very unlikely. But what we want to see is it debated, the issue debated in Parliament. We only need to get to 100,000 signatures for that. But as we go beyond that, I think it becomes harder to ignore. There's some really good politicians that are working on the other side of this, that do work with Ash and Peter, that do understand the issue. So I think it would be a well-attended debate. Sometimes these parliamentary petitions do get a debate, and it's kind of a small thing on the end of a Friday that no MP really turns up to. But I would put my money on to say that this would be a proper one, would be well attended, and I think would be really hard to ignore. So it's slightly tongue-in-cheek actually saying let's have a referendum, because they know it won't happen, but it's enough of a kind of a word and a threat to turn heads and get this issue properly talked about again.
Yeah. Okay, what's clear from this, hopefully, is this conversation, isn't just about pipes or treatment works or even individual companies. It's about how the system has been designed and what we prioritise and what we tolerate, and ultimately what we're willing to pay for. And as Tim's referenced a few times, you get the environment that you pay for. There's different ways to read into that, as we've discussed. But right now we're seeing the consequences of that, every day in rivers across the UK. Hopefully you found this episode interesting. I'll remind you that Tim's written a two-part blog articles that are on watermatters.life that I'd really highly encourage you to go and have a read of those. I'd also like to remind you that we now have the comments function at the bottom of each article, so please do engage with this, particularly around this topic. I feel like this is, I've spoken to a lot of people that have watched this show, and had quite a passionate reaction to it, but just feeling that and however you feel about it, it is one step. Talking to people about it and engaging in the conversation and really sort of encouraging others to watch it, and then as we've said so many times in this podcast, it's about we all have a part to play in what happens and what we'd like to see improve and all that sort of stuff, because awareness is only the first step. We've then got to do something about it. So we'll keep an eye on those comments. It'd be really good to see some discussion there, and if you really have an insight, especially if you're working in any of these organizations or somehow connected, then there's an invitation for anyone to come and talk to us on the podcast as well. I do think this is just the beginning of this conversation, and I hope that it'll bring more awareness around this topic, which is such an important topic within water management. So thank you, Tim. Thank you very much. It's really helpful that you've sort of got that direct line into Ash, and all of the the numbers and data and all this story that you've already written about in your book, that people, again, if they haven't read, please do read The Last Drop. It's a great starting point for your water management journey. But I've really enjoyed this episode. It's been fascinating talking to you about it. If you like this episode, please remember to like, please remember to subscribe. Put your email into watermatters.life so you get the fortnightly emails. But we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode. We look forward to seeing you then.